Welcome to the Good Price Show. We're joined by legend, obviously, in Function today. I hope it's going to be a good one. We're kind of just jumping into things. And it was kind of like a last second thing. I'm like, yo, Function, you should come on our podcast. He's like, all right. And, he showed up. What's up, Function? How are you?
What's up? What's up, gentlemen? Glad to be here.
Yeah. I feel like the problem is with you, bro, is you always change your PFP. I'm like, dude, like, this guy's on Bears. He's on Mutant Apes. He's like, sometimes it's your Bored Ape. I see like a couple other, Solana NFTs. So do you have one that you're like, do you ever get emotionally attached to your PFP, or you're just like, fuck it, like whatever I'm feeling today?
This is actually a really, really good question. Um, I think something that I've noticed all of crypto ever since I started, even pre NFTs, is that people tend to get emotionally attached to their investments. Um, during the ICO phase, it was all about different ICOs and that teams were promising things, and they'd have like icon or ICX gym on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, and now it's just the same thing with uh, JPEGs and things like that. And I really noticed it when I had my Bored Ape, my Function Bored Ape, the famous Cheetah Bored Ape. Um, that it became harder and harder and harder to sell the more and more my digital identity became tied with this image. Um, and so for me, like, I have taken an approach where it's less about keeping a specific image for a brand, and I just like to like ride and vibe with communities and teams and projects that are like I believe in and that I'm like vibing with. Like sometimes I change back to a mutant. I'm rocking bears and this and that. It's just more in the sense of I enjoy different teams and I enjoy different communities, and I noticed the experience of emotionally getting attached to my ape and my identity and like essentially brand almost being tied to it for a very long time. Um, and that's not something that I'm like really wanting to do with an investment per se. You know what I mean? I don't need to form an identity around a JPEG, um, preferably.
That's
So
a
it's a
yeah.
long answer, but that's kind of like my philosophy around like what I've experienced personally, what I've observed through like the Bored Ape phenomenon and all of these things. And it's awesome because it makes price action go crazy because nobody wants to sell. And at the same time, like I've actually had DMs with people who are like, dude, 99.99% of my net worth is in this one Bored Ape that I minted when it was $250. Like, and now it's 500 grand. And I don't even know what I would do with 500 grand. Like, what should I do? And these dudes are like working 9 to 2 a.m. at the bar every fucking day. You know what I mean? Um, and I noticed that the ego can like to get the ego can get like attached to things very very easily if you allow it to. Um, so that's part of also the gameplay beyond just like being passionate and inspired about different communities, but also just like noticing how I don't ever really want my identity to be tied to one picture that's worth a large amount of money, that could drastically change my life experience and the people, my friends and family's life experience.
For sure. I think it's a really good answer. A lot of people always have that dilemma where, like, you have something, let's say you have a profile picture for such a long time, and, you're not only are you attached to that PFP, but you're associated with it. And like, even if somebody else were to buy it, you're like, oh no, that's Function's PFP, right? Um, so it's interesting how, like, we associate ourselves. It's almost like our online identity. But at the same time, like you're saying, if you minted a Bored Ape at 250, right? And it's worth, $500,000, and that's like, your entire net worth. I mean, you're almost forced to sell it. There's, the emotional attachment has to go out the window at that point. If you can't afford, if it's more than, a certain percentage of your portfolio, you just, you have to let go at some point, right?
Yeah, man.
Huge monetary gain.
100%. 100%. I mean, that's honestly what I look for when I make investments in NFT projects. Is like, do the community have enough crazy motherfuckers that wouldn't sell if it went up to 50 or 100K? You know what I mean?
That's a great metric, dude. Honestly, that's like not an answer you'd hear every day. Most people would be like, "Can it get to 100K?" But it like staying there and having diamond-handed mofos, like you said, like just crazy dudes that will rep this to the grave, even if it's like $250,000, is like a far more sophisticated answer. Because like, how many projects have we seen that have like run up, touched an insanely high price, and then it's like all selling pressure at that point?
100%. 100%, bro. And like that's why I like am in the stance of being bullish on the bears, right? Like everyone else is always like, not everyone else, there's a large group of people that is bullish, but there's a large group of people that are also like, this is bad for Solana, this and this and this. There isn't any unique buyers, whatever the story is, right? But the reality is, if you look at the numbers, there's more Bored Apes, there's more Ethereum people putting more money into bears than I've ever seen before. And it started with DeGods and Solana Monkey business, but bears is taking it to a whole other level. And so like that's like when I look at investments, I'm not like looking at like floor prices per se. I mean, that is one of the metrics that I look at, but like the metric that I'm like really looking at is like, does this community have the potential and have the dedication to like actually carry this shit to like a huge number? And if they do, like what would be my strategic plan to sell like moving forward, right? Like in 2 months or 3 months when the community is popping, and if it does ever evolve to that point. These are the kind of things that I'm watching and I'm seeing. It has a lot less to do with charting or other metrics, because I think the NFT world is so fucking different than trading coins or any of that other shit.
Yeah, it's definitely its own beast. What do you think about influencers or people who have a lot of followers or any type of influence over, let's say CT, right? What do you think about them, exiting a certain project, whether it be quietly or loudly on Twitter, right? Like saying, you know what, I bought this at X price. I'm happy with these profits. I just sold, and announcing it to people, or like, let's say they just sell quietly and leave the community alone. Because sometimes people will look at it and be like, oh, he's fudding us. He thinks this is the top, or he doesn't see much more potential further than this. And, people get really emotional to their bags, and they're like, oh, like, why is this person selling? All the clown emojis and not going to make it signs, right? So, what do you think about that, and how an influencer or somebody should exit a project, right? Like, what's the best way to like not get hate for it almost, right? Because you're pretty much going to get attacked.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like there's really no right or wrong way to do it. Let's just say that, right? Right off the bat. I think there are, first off, like ways that to me in my like morals like feel like unintegritous, like out of integrity. Like I've seen a lot of people like ever since I started in crypto, like, they tweet something and then 10 minutes later they're selling their bags after they tweet something bullish. You know what I mean? Like that's like, it's like, come on, bro, it's the blockchain. Like we're watching your shit. You know what I mean? There's a ton of Solana influencers that do that shit. But if you're tweeting something and like for example, like with DeGods, right? Like full transparency, I was buying like so many DeGods back in October and then a bunch in January, right? I rode like the trend up to like 100-ish, and then I like honestly unloaded like a decent amount of DeGods specifically because I needed financial capital to put down for a house in the actual real world. But also like it was just like my point of exit. Like it just felt good to me. Like it was like 3 months like after they had bottomed. It was like I had made a 15 to 20x on each one at bare minimum. I still held a few for like long term and still believe in like Frank and like what they're doing. And like, dude, we're here to make money. You know what I mean? Like we're like, that's not the only thing we're here to do. Like we're here to like improve the ecosystem, build like creative tools with time and the experience that we have, which is kind of the stuff that I like to do as well. But when I'm trading, like the intention is to buy at a low price and sell at a high price. And I personally I don't see any problem if you've supported a project for a period of time and they've grown, and it's like maybe you've supported that growth, but also like the growth has gone way bigger than you could ever be. Like DeGods, like if somebody tried to tell me that I pump DeGods right now, I'd look at them and I'd be like, dude, like the community is 10 times larger than like I could have ever imagined it could ever be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's like I supported DeGods early. That in turn like helped like creative energy, and like Frank and I had talks early on when he was like in like down places and not really like believe, you know, and so it supported like the inspiration and the energy of it because he saw me tweeting and supporting it. And like in 3 months it's blown up into this community that's absolutely incredible and large. And if I sold the DeGod today at 200 SOL, they'd tell me that I was paper handing it. You know what I mean? Right. So I think there's ways to do it where an influencer can actually utilize their audience to support projects that they believe in, and have some sort of backing that they believe in. And then there's other influencers that are just like, this is the next big thing, tweet, 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 you know? And sometimes you get caught up in the hype. I've done that before too. You know, I've tweeted about fucking wiener dogs and all this other shit. I got 150 fucking wiener dogs in my wallet right now or some shit. You know what I mean? So like everybody's gonna put a person with more followers on a pedestal to some degree and hold them to a higher criteria than they would hold themselves to. So it also takes a certain level of person to be able to hold and manage that much energy and that many different people's opinions without it like allowing themselves to like crumble, you know?
100%, bro. I'd say like that's such a good point that like as someone that started out in social media, like I never used social media basically. Like I have an Instagram with like 400 followers. Never used Twitter in my life until August and just started tweeting about, you know, Solana NFTs. And it's been crazy. Like you got to be pretty like mentally strong because people fight you so hard. And like, I think you hit the nail on the head with the point about like, if you've supported a project and you've helped them like run up, you know, I think oftentimes people like overestimate the impact that like some of our tweets can have on the market. You know, like sometimes I'll come out like maybe, you know, giving an alternative view to like the current thing, and everyone's like maybe on the OK Bears train or whatever, and I make a tweet about relative value, right? And I'm like, okay, well, just presented without comment, like one OK Bear is like almost one SMB, right? And people will attack me and they'll be like, man, you're gonna cause the whole market to collapse. I'm like, dude, like I think you overestimate. This is way bigger than you and me. Like these are people that we can't see. They're from all over the world. They're a lot of them, like you said, are bringing money to Solana for the first time. But you know, it's a pretty dangerous like dynamic, you know. But I think overall, it's been so positive, like to see all of this, and I really hope like we can avoid that wallet watching culture that exists on ETH, you know, because I know it's really bad over there to the point that like a lot of the people have like protected responses on now.
I mean, everybody fucking follows my wallets. It's crazy. I get screenshots on Twitter of Function wallet trackers, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, how is that? Like, why? Like, that's a bad idea. Like, I'm out here buying like random shit. Like, I don't even know what the fuck I'm buying half the time. Like, sometimes I make good bets, but other times it's just like I'm bored and I'm on Magic Eden and I'm like, this shit looks cool, and I just buy one, right? Like, people shouldn't follow that, and like I think it just comes down to like the key core thing, which is what crypto's always been about, which is personal responsibility and self-responsibility. That's literally like the entire point of Bitcoin is to like have financial responsibility for the first time and not like look at the banks as if they're mommy and daddy and are going to save you from something, right? And
Yeah.
so what people lack the most, which is I'm going to say it, it's bold, but it's why they're poor. Most people are poor is because they lack self-responsibility. They're constantly trying to disperse responsibility of their own actions onto other people. And that's why they're poor, and that's why they're like not just poor like financially, but like poor and like broke like mentally and emotionally as well, right? Like that's kind of like in order to be hold large amounts of money like in your wallet or in assets or however, you will have to like understand that you are 100% fully responsible and like for those like assets. Like that's the way when I got hacked like 2 weeks ago or whatever, like literally I didn't tweet about it the first day. I was just like kind of like honestly just down and depressed for like 24 hours. Then I picked myself up the next day and I'm like, word, like, am I gonna like get on Twitter and go like cry about it like everybody else does, or am I just gonna be like, yo, this happened, and guess what, it's like on to the next thing. And so I wrote a tweet thread, and fucking next day bears are minting, and we're like aping into bears at 20 like soul floor, you know what I mean? I bought 2 of my suits for 65 each. I sold one for 400 today, you know? It's just
Bro, see,
like it's like you could be caught up in the bullshit and the victim mentality, or you could pull yourself out of victimhood and be like, I got to get back in the game and just like play.
it's
You
all
know?
mentality, bro. Like what you just said is so powerful. Like if you like if you're self-aware, you like, you know, obviously like take time to lick your wounds or whatever and be like, fuck, okay, this sucks. Like this is a shitty situation. There's no two ways about it. But like the comeback's gonna be real. I remember I commented that on your tweet as well. I was like, the comeback's gonna be glorious. And it literally was.
Fuck yeah, bro. I mean, like, it's like everybody like was very, very like empathetic, and I appreciated that. You know, everybody's like, oh, it's so sorry, that must have been so fucking hard, and like all of this stuff. But the reality is like it only like the only moments that I found really challenging about it was when I was like sulking for myself. You know, when I found myself in my own head or in my own like hole, just being like, damn, this sucks, like everything's bad, you know, like that's the only time it was bad. But as soon as I was able to change the internal narrative to like, yo, you know what, like you've taken worse hits before, like you've lost more in trades. Yes, you may not be like as directly responsible, you didn't click the buy and sell button and lose money, but you've lost more. Like you can pick yourself up from this, you can make it back very easily. You've done it before, you can do it again, you know. And as soon as that internal narrative changes, like honestly, reality starts to change. Like most people are just talking in their head about how shitty they are, or how they can't trade, or how they're like buying the top all the time. And while that's like kind of a funny meme and a joke, like in reality, I will never ever tell myself that, because like I believe that like what you emanate, whether it be through like your thoughts or your words or your actions, like they directly affect your reality.
Completely, bro.
And not to get all like woo woo hippie on it, but fuck it, let's do it, like they do. And if you can utilize that like level of awareness when in a realm with 50, 100,000 people all trading the same asset and going after the same process, you're going to have a better time navigating it. You're going to feel a lot less stress and pressure if you like are able to hold like a better frame than you're a piece of shit or whatever you tell yourself. You know what I mean?
It's an edge, bro. Like I think 100% it's an edge. I saw this quote from Andre Agassi, the tennis champion, who played, I think it was like a US Open final against Pete Sampras and got smoked. And he basically said like, you know, he thought it was his day, and when you think it's your day, it usually is.
100%.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a mentality thing, and like a lot of what you said, function. Like I completely agree with. And people, you know, they could laugh at the idea, um, but to be honest, like you should, I don't know, you should wake up in the morning and like look forward to like X, Y, and Z, and tell yourself like you can do it. Like as cheesy as that sounds, like you should have that mentality. You don't have to like scream to the world, right? But like you should have that mentality, and goal in mind, right? Because the mentality, if the mentality is lost, then there's no drive, there's no motivation, there's, you know, there's little to nothing there. Um, so that's like, in my opinion, like step one.
100%, bro. Yeah. I mean, it's like most people haven't even taken the time to think about why they're trading JPEGs, right? Like in reality, like most people don't even realize like how much money they need or how much money they want from JPEGs, or how long they're willing to hold them, or even if they're willing to let them go to zero, right? Like a lot of people just buy based off of like impulse, and eventually end up in a situation where either A, they've made a lot of money and they don't know what to do, or B, they've lost a lot of money and they don't know what to do. You know? So it's kind of like what I implore for everyone, and what I did when I first got into crypto was like kind of like, and I continually do on a regular basis, is I'm continually like restructuring and like organizing goals and like things that I like am aiming for, as well as like assets in different categories that I want to have, whether digital or physical. Like I'm thinking about a lot of different things and how I can best organize them to make myself the most comfortable, as well as make myself liquid enough to have fun and be able to play JPEGs. Like most people don't even think about that. And so I think that's like part of the first step that you're talking about, Iced, is like having at least the level of awareness to realize that like if you want to have a step up on everyone else in this game, you have to be thinking differently. And in order to be thinking differently, you actually have to think, which is what most people don't do.
For sure. I also wanted to ask, two things. Like obvious. I mean, you started off on Ethereum, I assume, right? And you were trading NFTs there, first. But do you have
Yes and no.
really? So okay, so why don't you respond to that, and I'll ask my next question.
All right, cool. So I started. I mean, I fucked around with CryptoKitties a little in 2017 and all that stuff. So I guess technically it was like Ethereum, but I think I minted hash masks on Ethereum in like, what was that, December of 2020 or something. But I was a huge Solana guy at the time. Like I was like actually studying Solana. I actually had like an educational account called Solana Nation. I don't know if either of you remember it. I think we followed each other on that account. It had like 10K followers. And it was literally an account where I would just post threads about step finance or NFT, like Solana, like whatever projects were coming out at the time. I would just, this was pre-Fxnction, by the way, just to give you like some timeline. And I had that account literally because I understand Twitter a lot better than most people. And anytime that I really want to get into like a community, like deeply, like Solana or NFTs specifically, right? Like I created a new account to get into an algorithm to be able to like filter through information better. And when creating Twitters, I never intend to like make them large or like have big followings. Honestly, it just like naturally happens. Like I always intend to use them as tools to understand where communities are at so that I can navigate how to make better investments. So I bought Solana at $18 in maybe, I think it was January or something of 2021 or December of 2020. Can't remember. And I bought Solana at $18. And this was like pre Solana Monkey Business, pre Fract. And I had that account. So I was talking with the SMB team when Gen 1 was coming out. I bought 2 sets of the Gen 1 before there was even minting. I minted like 50 fracks off their website when it was like 0.5 SOL at $20 to mint them. I've been in, I would argue to say that I was fucking heavy deep in Solana NFTs. I wouldn't even argue to say that. I would say I was heavy deep in Solana NFTs at the very, very beginning. And I wasn't tweeting about them as much or paying attention to them as much because I essentially just bought like 2 sets of Gen 1s, minted a bunch of Gen 2s, got some like of the other like fracks and all the other stuff, And then I kind of just forgot about them until October when Solana was pumping. Like I remembered I had them, but I wasn't like one of those people that was like in the Discord trying to sell their Gen 1 Solana Monkey Business for 5 Solana. Like I was just holding that shit in my wallet, like not really realizing that it was worth a lot because the Bored Ape market was so hot. And I had just started the Fxnction account after that. And essentially I got into the Bored Ape community and was just like, this shit's crazy. And all my attention and focus was there. So long story short, that's the answer. There's a little bit of rambling, but you get it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it's a cool story. I mean, so you didn't mint a Bored Ape, did you?
No, that's the interesting thing. I was earlier to Solana NFTs than I was to Bored Apes. Like,
Yeah, the first time I ever like I got into NFTs the summer of last year. And the first time I ever looked at the Bored Ape floor, it was like, somewhere between like 8 and 12 Ethereum, I think. That was like the first time I ever saw Bored Apes. I'm like, damn, this shit's expensive. I thought it was expensive then. Which is wild to think about. I was like, damn, like maybe, I don't know. Like, and I realistically, I could have bought one, right? Like, but like, I just thought to myself, how can I spend that much money on a picture, right? You know, and obviously it was the top at that point, but you know, the top just keeps on topping. So
Well, that's what happened to me, bro. When I first bought my Bored Ape, it was I think in May, right? And it was like 11:30 p.m. Bored Apes had just gone for the first time from like a 2 ETH floor to like a 10 ETH floor, or like no, it was like 7 ETH, I think, floor, right? And they were like pumping like crazy. And it was like 11 p.m. I was stoned as fuck, like super high, and I was in bed, and I was like closing my eyes to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, like it was just like one of those impulse moments, and I was just like, "Fuck, I got to go buy a Bored Ape." And I like ran downstairs. I spent like 11 Ethereum on a fucking DMT Bored Ape, and then woke up the next morning. And mind you, 11 Ethereum I think was like 22 grand at the time, right? I had never spent that amount of money on any like JPEG. You know what I mean? Like I had made trades that were large, but never like put 22 grand into one illiquid or potentially illiquid asset, you know. I woke up the next morning, bro, tripping out, fucking paper handed the thing for like 8 ETH.
damn. So it was an impulse buy and an impulse sell.
Impulse buy, impulse sell, sat in like the loss of like 5 grand, which was a lot amount of money for me at the time. Like sat in the feeling of that loss for like a full day, was just like kind of beating myself up to a degree. And then like started to get back into it and pay attention. And then the floor hit 10 ETH. And then like 4 days later, it's back to 5 ETH. And I'm like watching it and I'm like, all right, fuck it. We're going in on this shit and we're actually going to do it. And I started buying like and trading them heavily at like 5 ETH.
That's crazy, dude. I don't know that I feel like things even back then, dude. Like I remember I was seeing like World of Women under like 1 Ethereum. Um,
I minted like 20 World of Women, bro,
yeah, dude. There was a lot
including
of stuff super super cheap, and all you really had to do was mint them or buy them, you know, on secondary and sit on your hands for 6 months, and like you
literally.
literally made like more money than your job would pay you in 15 years.
I mean, I thought I was a genius, dude. I fucking minted like 20 World of Women, like had night goddesses and all that shit. You know what I mean? Which are like what, like 100 grand now or something stupid. And I sold a night goddess for 1 ETH like the second day because I was like, dude, this to like 1 ETH profit, and then I have like 6 or 7 ETH left over. I could buy another Bored Ape. Fuck it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
that's the thing people get stuck up on. You know, like even if things still keep going up after the fact, you could still make more trades or, you know, different investments with that same amount of money, right? Like it's not just going to stay in cash or maybe you need it for, you know, your family or, you know, personal reasons, whatever. But some people are like, damn, like I could have gotten more, you know, and sometimes like you're just better off taking the 10x or 15x, even though like there's a potential 100x on the floor, you know, like potentially there. But you know, if you have to take care of stuff, you know, for personal reasons or your family or whatever the case may be, like that shit comes first, and obviously this comes secondary.
I mean, let's be real. Like, well, there's 2 things on this that I want to talk about. One is like, let's be real. Like, when D gods are at 100 soul floor, and they just went there from 5 in about a 30 to 40 day time frame, it makes no sense to like beat people up for selling there. And I'm not just talking about it for myself, because like when you're in that moment, you don't see that it's going to 2 to 300. You can't predict something like that. You can't predict like a blow off the top, and you don't know when the blow off the top is. And that's actually how most people get wrecked, is they like wait for the blow off the top, and then it like either never happens, or they hold through it thinking that it's going to go even further, right? And the second point that I want to make on that is any form of looking at the past, at what you sold for like a lower amount of money than it is now, is only a form of self-mutilation, and it will only leave you demoralized and unable to actually execute on the next actions that you need to execute on to get where you want to be.
For sure. I think,
And
you know,
I see it happen all the time, dude. It's like literally all over Twitter, and I struggle with it fucking daily, bro. Like I look at my D God's bag sometime, and I'm like, damn, if I had held all of those and staked all of those, I'd have like a few million, you know, liquid.
yeah,
But
you can't.
like you can't do that to yourself, or else you'll fall into a hole where you actually can't see clearly how to execute on the next actions.
And you'll miss the next one, bro. I think that the
100%.
super like interesting thing for me was like talking to people like Soft Money and like hearing what you just said. That gives so much perspective. Like 2 ways of getting a 50x, right? You pick the investment of a fucking lifetime, and the constellations align on you, and it's a 50x in one go, or you do a 5x and then you take profits and do a 10x.
100%.
There'll always
100%.
be, you can't beat yourself up. I say this
Yeah.
all the time, right? Like even if you missed OK Bears, and some people, 100, what the floor right now is like somewhere between, I don't know, 120, 130 right now. And some people on Solana are priced out, right? So I'm like, dude, if you missed OK Bears, and you're priced out, you can't like keep coping about OK Bears. You just have to look for the next one. And hopefully you'll catch that one, post mint or minted, or under in a price range that you actually be able to afford. But coping about it and not being able to afford it and like complaining on Twitter is not going to do you any good. And I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I mean, you also got to think about like how money's like fluctuating and circulate. Like if you can't afford a bear, but you have a bunch of other Solana NFTs, like instead of hating on the bears, you should be figuring out a way to get a bear. You know what I mean? If you like can see the dedication and conviction of the community and you actually like believe in it. I think most people, what happens is like when they see that, they're holding other bags that aren't mooning, and they essentially immediately close down and they're like, fuck this, like fuck that, fuck this, fuck that. Like this isn't, they're essentially like, life isn't fair. It's not fair that the bears are mooning and mine isn't, you know? And that's also a loser mentality. Like a winner mentality is like trying to understand why the bears are mooning and trying to figure out what project's going to do it next or do it just as good or hopefully even better. You know what I mean? Or figuring out how to get liquid to get a bear if you think it's going to go even further.
Yeah, no, I think NFTs are a culture driven market. And people fail to realize that. They're like, oh, but this NFT has so much utility. They have X, Y, and Z. They have, they're a really good website. They have great devs. They have, whatever the case may be. But if let's say, another collection has off the top marketing, right? Like crazy marketing. Like even like you can even relate this to Bored Ape, right? Like celebrities were getting Bored Apes, and that was like huge, right? Like that, it almost like bridge the gap between like the normies and the NFT culture, right? Because like people were like Post Malone or Jimmy Fallon, they were getting Bored Apes, and everyone's like, holy fuck, that's sick. Like I want to own a Bored Ape. I want to be a part of that club. So it was almost like a social status at the same time. But people, I don't know. To Solana NFTs, there was a whole meta where like NFTs have to have staking, breeding, utility XYZ, Ponzonomics, whatever, right? And then now everyone's like, oh, branding, as if it's this whole new thing, right? Like that hasn't existed prior to this.
Bro, that's why I've been like secretly buying like art projects on Solana. Just like ones that aren't like dead, like the teams are actually still communicating, but they just don't have any other premise besides art, and they got sick art. There's a couple that are out there right now. I'm not going to name names because they're low and people will be like, you're pumping it. But like and it's like also a very high risk, like long-term bet. But like, I think what you're saying is so important. NFTs are culture driven. The culture on Solana, like pre like large, like significantly large volume, aka OK Bears, and like if like ETH people coming in, was like add as much fucking utility as possible and like pray that like either influencers catch your project or whatever, that you get enough pumponomics to get in there. Like, I'm not going to name names, but there's probably been like 4 or 5 projects that have come out in the last like month that have the same exact fucking roadmap to me. Like, they're not different. You stake your fucking NFT, you get a token, the token's a raffle, like DeGods did it well and originally, and continues to like innovate with their token. And I think they set a model up that like made people want to like copy and paste it. And it's boring, it's repetitive. And what OK Bears shows is that like a new wave of Solana is happening that we'll essentially add a lot more liquidity, but we'll also add like a different style of investor, like one who's not like looking for these like Ponzi-nomics to make $15 a day for staking all of their NFTs. Like they don't like a Bored Ape doesn't give a fuck about that. He wants a rare bear or a rare monkey or a rare D-God that like will hold value or retain value and hopefully do multiple X's over the next year.
Yeah, bro. I think that's such a good point. Like the token meta, it definitely put a floor on a project. Like passive income kids will price that in, but I think it put an even bigger ceiling because like you've seen projects that are basically priced based on their yield, and that's great when your token's pumping, but sustained utility for a token is like one of the hardest puzzles to solve. And Bored Ape did the right approach. They built a giant company and raised and had 400 million of funding plus this crazy IP, celebrities, like the whole brand built, and then they dropped it, right? And it's like, what's behind the Ape token? Literally the full force and faith of Yuga Labs, right? But I think launching with the token day one is just such a mistake. And like we're graduating out of this meta. And I mean, this because you've made major plays on ETH, but like on ETH, the top projects like Azuki and the rest of them, they barely even have a roadmap. Like they just show that the teams are strong. They say like, okay, these are our like values and our 3 areas of like interest at a high level. This is what we're like working towards. And our art is sick, and their communities are just vibing, honestly.
Well, that's like
Yeah.
the most interesting thing. Oh, my bad, Ice.
No, go ahead. It's okay. You have something to say. No problem.
Yes, I do. No, that's like I think the most interesting thing to me is because like people on Solana all the time now are tweeting like, dude, but my project has this utility and bears don't have that. Like, welcome to the new ecosystem, bro. Like, if you weren't paying attention to Ethereum NFTs for the last year and a half, you're gonna get a big fucking wake up call about what real money looks for and what real money cares about. You know what I mean? And if you position yourself right, you're gonna fucking make a buttload of money. But if you're not being like educated and you're like allowing your ego and your rightness to get in the way of making money, then you're going to stay poor. You know what I mean? And you're not going to be able to like find the actual opportunities that put you in the right position in order to make like large gains. And that's what's so interesting to me about the observation of Twitter is like it's mostly people's egos that make them wrong. Like
For
mostly people
sure.
most people on Twitter are like not most people. There are a lot of people on Twitter are like Solana's shit, this, and now they're buying bears at like 100x when they could have been buying Solana monkey business at mint price. You know what I mean? Like it's literally constant like needing to be right that actually can like make you wrong in the actual reality of the investment.
It's
And
also the unwillingness to change, right? Like even if
exactly.
you go back to like 2013, 2014, all I heard was that Bitcoin was used for like sex trafficking, like Silk Road, like drugs, like shit like that, right? Because the first time I wanted to buy Bitcoin, I wanted some discount on RuneScape membership, and I couldn't
Mhm.
figure it out. I was like 13, 14 at the time. Um, but yeah, like that narrative quickly changed, and the people who saw the potential like bought Bitcoin, like even like $1, $100, 500, whatever, right? Um, and they were the people that took the leaps of faith and were like, you know what, there's actually something here. And the same thing on on Ethereum and when DeFi and NFTs, whatever, right? Like
Mhm.
someone had to be early, if that makes sense, right? Like there's someone has to be early, and then people come after that, right? And that's where the early adopters come in.
Well, that's also what most people don't understand when floor prices get high, right? Like I had a couple D gods bashing me for selling some of them between 80 and 100, and 120. And I'm like, okay, like I could see, like you could call me a paper hand or whatever, even though I'm up 15, like whatever. I could see that. Floors at 350, you can gloat a little bit, I understand. And like without me selling those at those points, like it wouldn't traded hands to someone who wants to hold it to 350 or 500. You know what I'm saying? Like the actual movement of the money in the market, whether you're selling early or late or whatever it is, like is all part of the ecosystem and all is what makes it run. Like without people selling at 100, it can't reach 300. It's like part of the game. Like that's what creates the momentum is the volume and the new people buying it and talking about it on Twitter and then connecting with the community. Like that's how the ecosystem grows. So you actually need people like Banksy or Pranksy and those guys like who minted 1,000 Bored Apes and sold them all under 2 ETH. You need those people because without that, Bored Ape would have taken an extra month or two to mint out, and maybe the team wouldn't have wanted to do it. Or without that, maybe like he held all 1,000 in his wallet and like it never got enough traction because there wasn't enough people holding and there wasn't enough dispersion. You know what I mean? Like at the right time. Like there are so many factors involved that like shaming anyone for their market decisions is just honestly ignorant of their own life circumstances and how the overall game works.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree with that. I think a lot of people lack and they don't respect the vision, especially on Solana, of the power of a 10K PFP, right? Like if you have a smaller collection size, it's harder to get that like rally of people. It's almost like, even like cult like. It's harder to cultivate that culture, get that rally of people behind a certain thing, have that same goal, same vision. Because naturally you're just gonna have less holders, right? And DGods was kind of like the first collection to have a 10K PFP be so successful on Solana, and partially, I think you can attribute that to their collection being a 10K PFP just right off the bat, and that itself makes them that much stronger.
It's like their power level, bro. I mean, if the like argument that like more supply means lower price, then why is Bored Ape the most expensive NFT in the world? Like mass appeal at PFP, right? So it's obviously not true. It's more just like think about a brand, right? What like would Adidas be as relevant as they are today if they only sold 1,000 pairs of shoes per year? Like I think you maybe amongst some like sneakerhead group, this could be like super exclusive and it'd be like the Grail shoes or whatever. But like they would never be, a mainstream brand.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like it's a fact because if you like look at the majority of low supplies on Solana, like most of them don't do super hot, to be honest with you. There's a couple that'll pop off here and there and like get to the 50, 100 soul range, but most of them, even with cool art and unique culture and good community, stay relatively low. And I think that's mostly because like like low supply isn't always like the best solution to create high prices. You know what I mean? Even if you have you have to create super high demand and a very high incentive for people to hold.
For sure. Yeah, you need, a low supply can give you a supply crunch, but it also can lack the liquidity, right? Like if you have a 10K PFP,
Exactly.
a lot of the times there's, shit's constantly getting bought up off the floor, right? And that's obviously a good sign. If you're seeing a collection have a lot of volume, that means people are exchanging hands, people are wanting to buy it, and people are trading it. So if you have like a collection, let's say of collection size of let's say, I don't know, 100 or 500, that's not to say it can't be successful, right? Like look at Proof, right? They have I think 1,000 in their collection, and they're pushing, I don't know, 120 Ethereum floor, and that's, I'm not saying they can't be successful, but there's only a few proofs, exchanged. Sometimes not even one proof a day, right? Like maybe a few a day are exchanged, right? There's not that much liquidity, but that's also different because they're not a PFP. But yeah, I would say like, the power of a 10K collection, it really is the magic number. I really think.
Yeah, I think like I don't know if there's a perfect number for anything, and I think like the ecosystem will be interesting to see what happens as more people join and like wonder if 10K collections will become 20 or 30 or 50. You know what I mean? But I definitely think it's the culture right now, and especially on Solana, everybody thought it couldn't happen, and now that it is happening and it's being relevant, I think more and more collections will probably launch with higher supplies just to like play in that market cap realm.
Yeah.
Like, because I was looking at it like the other day, I'm like, okay, Solana Monkey Business has relatively close to the same like floor prices DeGods and or at the time they did, you know, and I'm like, okay, cool, but it's half the market cap because they have half the supply, you know. And I don't even know if like on a psychological level, if like if they originally started with 10K monkeys, like if the floor price would even really be much different now, you know what I mean? Like I'm almost like watching and seeing that like floor price and supply are almost irrelevant, like not tied like super deeply together yet in the or in the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think like honestly, people try to put a formula on it, right? I've heard people be like, but how is it possible this collection has a lower floor price? It's only 3,000 and that one's 10,000. I'm like, bro, like don't try to put a fucking formula on this because you're going to be wrong. Like you can't control these variables. Oftentimes what you think is moving the price isn't actually what's moving the price. It's best to just go into this like eyes wide open and just talk to people and get a sense of like what people are saying, make your own opinions and like just don't follow the crowd because markets are not efficient, right? I'm like the champion of saying this. Like NFT markets are the definition of an inefficient market, right? Things are always mispriced. Like, you know, if the price is 50, chances are it's worth 35 or 60, right? It's the reason why you can make money trading. And like it's the reason why, you know, I was able to cop 100 Soul Gods at 1 in December because I met the team and I was like, okay, this makes no fucking sense. Like these guys are super smart, utterly committed, like they're not giving up. And it's like you find these idiosyncrasies and inefficiencies in the market, right? So it's like, you know, I often like try to tell people to just like try to form your own opinions because if you're following the pack, you're always going to be late. You're going to be exit liquidity for someone else. And you can be right or you can be wrong, but you just have to take a line.
100%. And you have to be okay with being wrong. Like I am 100% okay with every single NFT I have going to zero. That's the stance that I take when I trade NFTs. Is when I buy something, I don't think that my NFT is now that NFT that I bought for 15 Sol is just now 15 Sol that I have. No, that's not the way I look at it. Like as soon as I buy an NFT for 15 Sol, I now have 0 Sol. That's the way I play the game. And I think that's what also makes me super successful because I don't get like hella like caught up in my like emotions about losses then. Because I already saw it as a loss. Like it was already a loss like when I spent the money. Like it's the same thing as buying a pair of shoes. Like I'm not thinking I'm gonna get my money for my fucking shoes back in like 2 years. Like if I just like no, it doesn't work like that. And I think that's what makes me like more successful than most people at it because I'm willing to like buy something and completely let it go after I buy it. Instead of most people where like, and again, this is something that was trained. You heard my story about the Bored Apes earlier. I wasn't like naturally good at this. I had to like build this skill and this muscle over time. But like I think most people like buy a asset for a large amount of money to them, whatever that might be, and they get stuck in thinking about it too much, and eventually just become overwhelmed by themselves, by the investment that they made. And that's why like I like consistently hold the stance of like just letting it go, like fuck it, you know.
Yeah.
Dude, people that are you know, at ease and at comfort with themselves are like the best traders. And it really is a game against yourself. I find that people really psych themselves out and it's all in their head, man. Like for humans to begin with, losses loom larger than gains, right? We like just like mentally feel losses a lot more than we feel gains. And it's like the fear and like I don't know. I don't want to get too technical, but like our reptilian brains are like programmed to like, you know, avoid losses more than we are to like go out there and get gains. But reality is like your ability to manage your own game and like stay in your lane and make decisions with a cool head is like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I remember I was reading an article and it said something about like people hate losing money more than they like making money, right? And that's an interesting like thing to think about, right? So you get more hung up and, you know, more mad at yourself for losing money, and obviously more like, you know, more scared to lose money than the satisfaction you get from gaining it. So it's such an interesting stat. Almost makes people feel like they're naturally scared to invest. Um, you know, and in turn, obviously, you know, lowers their risk tolerance. Um, so it's very interesting, and I don't know how much that holds true, but I feel like it does. Um, but yeah, it's crazy to me that stat.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of about like just like where they're putting their attention and their focus. You know what I mean? Like what I've experienced is it's kind of like having to constantly navigate doubt and fear. That's like what I think leads to most of the paper hands on Solana, right? Like most people live in an experience when they buy an NFT and they fall into what exactly what you're saying, Ice, like not wanting to lose money more than they want to make money, which is essentially just a fear mentality and just like falling into doubt. So like you'll see someone buying like a OK Bear for 180, then list it for 160 in like 30 minutes because the floor dropped like a couple Solana, right? Like that's because, in my opinion, they've just allowed their doubt to overcome their rational thinking. And if they're unable to like actually keep rational thinking, then you're just not going to be a good trader. And you can't like force like most people think they can force rational trading by like shutting off their emotions, and that's like just not physically possible. Like the only way to like actually create like rational thinking in your experience is to like be able to navigate through your emotions and understand where like doubt is trying to creep in and not allow it to.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's a tricky game because people, you know, they always want to like out trade the market, and you know, obviously Legends always like, you know, the market it is consistently wrong, and it is, right? Like, you know, everything is priced according, you know, markets are, you know, a psychological like battle always consistently. Um so, you know, if you can kind of like have your own nooks and crannies and like, you know, I guess almost time in the market almost sets you up for success, because if you fail time and time again and you learn from those mistakes, right? Like, don't be stubborn with yourself. Be like, you know what? Like, I did something wrong. I should learn from this. What did I do wrong? And next time, maybe you won't get it wrong. Um, and obviously, you know, the most successful people in the world, they fail time and time again until, you know, one time eventually. You only have to be right once. And that's also kind of the way I really trade. Um, I like to like moon or dust my NFTs. Like you were saying, I imagine all my NFTs are zero. Um, and I'm like, you know what? Like this is either going to 10x plus, like 10, 20, 100x, or it's going to zero. And there's no in between. I'm not looking to like sell for like a 50% gain. Um, that's just not my game plan or my structure whenever I come to buy an NFT. Um, it's really more or less like 10x plus or zero. And that's kind of my game plan. But in that, right, if I invest $1,000 10 times, you know, only one of them has to be right for me to break even. And chances are, you know, at least like two of them would be right, right? Or even if one of them are right, maybe a 20x's and I still double my money. So that's more of the approach I kind of take. I know everybody has like their own niche and way they trade, but I think that's worked. I don't know. That's worked the best for me personally. But yeah,
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's the same kind of stance that I take. You know, it's like you just let it go when you make the investment, and you see what the fuck happens. And
Yeah, pretty much.
Hopefully, hopefully you've made some good educated guesses and get some good educated bets, and it doesn't help that like most of the time over the last few years we've been in an up only market, so like everybody seems like a fucking genius, you know what I mean? But like you just gotta like take a bet, and I think what's not being said in the formula, which I think you're implying, but could be vocalized a little bit, is like you have to have the balls to take the risk and have conviction. You know, most people see a 5x and they're like, I'm done, and they're out. And sometimes I do too. You know what I mean? It's like about the strategy. But if you find a project that you're invested in, you really believe in, like, and you have conviction for, that's how you make 100x's. Not because like you just like most people, it's not because you like randomly just woke up one day and forgot you had an asset and there it is. Like, no, it's because you had conviction in the community, you saw it was growing and you wanted to participate and you wanted to hold the asset.
Dude, the conviction is huge. Like I remember in the early days of SMB, there was a fight in the Discord to like get people to believe this was even possible. Like there's this guy named Burner 208 who was like famous. I mean, OGs know Burner. He was in there and he was basically saying like, you guys are like failing to recognize that the floor is going to be at 30 in 2 months, right? And we were like laughing about it at the time because we're like, bro, that's 15 times mint. Like you know, people are just like, this guy's, you know, off his rocker. These guys are completely delusional. But at the same time, it was like, okay, yeah, that's funny and all. We laugh about it. But what if it does actually fucking happen? And like, how crazy would that be? Like, we're the first PFP on Solana with mass appeal. Like, fucking believe it, people.
100%, bro. And that's like the type of conviction that actually creates community around it, right? Like, and I think that's like probably the point that most people miss when they are investing in projects, is they're looking a lot at metrics and other things, but they're not looking at actually not just the size of community growth, but the actual interactions within the community. And if you can see that and watch how other people are having convictions and things, like the more people that have a conviction in a certain project and like really, really believe in it, essentially like you're creating less of a supply and more of a demand. Because like while Bored Ape has a 10,000 supply, it really only got like a 3,000, like a 7,000 supply, you know, because there's 3,000 people at least that will never fucking sell their Bored Ape because they're fucking like believe in it and like
those are the type of people you want to attract, right? And get in your collection. Those are the diamond handers you really want. They stabilize your floor price, and they, you know, they're like ride or die for you in that collection, and that's what makes a really strong community.
Exactly. And like, to be 100% frank and honest, like what really creates big community, not big communities, but what really creates big price action and like large floor prices is like, and what I've observed consistently over the last excuse me, over the last year or two, it's whales, bro. Like it always has been in crypto, but specifically in NFTs. Like as soon as a group of whales show conviction in a project, it changes the entire community's perspective around it. Like as soon as, like, I'll give a celebrity example. It's not a great example of whales, but as soon as like MoonPay started getting celebrities into Bored Apes, they went from cool NFTs to cool, like iconic things that you wanted to have for the culture, right? And they brought it into a broader cultural perspective. On our more perspective, when people like HGE come into Solana and start to drop thousands of Solana on NFTs, like, and people like Urkan, you know, and these other like DeGod whales that are just like blowing like money on NFT, like that to me is one of the ultimate signals of a growth of an ecosystem, because those are the people that actually don't give a fuck. Like if someone came in and bought my fucking DeGod for like 88K like a couple weeks ago, right? Like, you know, that boy doesn't give a fuck if that goes to zero or not. You know, like he probably has like 8 million,
you know, or like $1 million. Like 88K is not going to like change like his life circumstances to a large degree. And those, positively and negatively, I think there's positives and negatives for the ecosystem about that. But I think those type of people, those whales, are really the ones that create like solidity within a community that's already established and already built most of the time, right?
Yeah,
Like
and also you have to have people who buy the top, because as people buy the top, it becomes it almost like breaks through it, right? And like, oh, they're actually selling for X price, so I could list mine for X price as well, and that's what it's worth because that's what the last person paid for it. So
Exactly.
that helps as well.
Exactly. So it's interesting. I think like the Solana ecosystem is just about to see a whole new wave of things that we've never seen before. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's been an hour. You know, I think it was a really good podcast, really informative. And you know, I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. I think a lot of people are, you know, are going to be excited to hear this for sure.
Excited. I
Yeah,
got one more thing that I want to add before we
sure.
dip. Your fucking Solana alien pipe monkey looks like shit, dude. It looks like ass, man.
Bro,
my
bro,
God. This guy
he
doesn't
woke
even-
up and chose violence. What is this?
Got him.
Got him. He had to just throw it in there at the end. But no, seriously, man, thanks for coming
He was
through.
waiting
And
for it.
yeah, bro, just wanted to say also, like, Function, you're one of my first follows when I got to Solana, bro. And I think it's pretty clear, if anyone's heard you speak, that you're a lot more than just the dick jokes guy. You're a investor and a giga brain with it. So thanks for coming through, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And past all the jokes, I do appreciate both of you. It's fun to go have the banter on Twitter and all that. So thanks for the invite.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I appreciate you coming on. That was a lit podcast. Let's wrap it up, Legend. Legend, we're still live, buddy. I think.